by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries. In the weeks ahead, you will see these and other programs by various denominations.
Welcome to Austin Faith Dialogue. On today's program, we're going to have the opportunity to talk about identity and faith, traditions, and pilgrimage. We'd like to invite you to stay with us on Austin Faith Dialogue because you're going to meet some very interesting people.
This is Austin Faith Dialogue, a public affairs program discussing the important crossroad of religion in life, produced by Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KTBC TV. Austin Faith Dialogue highlights the interaction of the religious community with the social and cultural issues throughout our area. Now, today's edition of Austin Faith Dialogue.
I mentioned to you at the top of the program that we're going to talk about faith, pilgrimage, and identity. And if someone asked you your identity, you'd probably tell them your name and a little bit about your history and where you come from and what work you do and your family. And today on Austin Faith Dialogue, I want you to meet someone whose identity is wrapped up in a faith tradition that, well, not many of us know much about. Christ Singh Khalsa is a member of the Sikh faith community. And today on Austin Faith Dialogue, I'd like you to meet him and visit with him and find out something more about his identity and indeed his faith pilgrimage. Christ Singh, welcome to our program, Austin Faith Dialogue. And I'd like to ask you a little bit about, well, you weren't always a Sikh, but let's find out about the Sikh faith. Where are they located, what is their history, and where do they come from?
Started in India in the late 1400s as a reform movement about the same time that Martin Luther started the Reformation movement in Europe. Started as a reform movement for the problems seen in the Hindu faith and the Islamic faith. It ended up being a synthesis of some of the best points of both, and in many ways ended up being very, very similar to an early Christian practice. It is, in many ways, the oldest form of democracy on the planet.
Started in India, I hear you say.
In India, right.
And was a reform movement drawing upon both the Hindu and the Islam faith.
Right.
What are some of the basic teachings of the Sikh faith?
We do not agree with the caste system at all. We do not agree with the exclusivity of any faith. We believe that the Creator, God, whatever you would want to call him, her, it, is universal. We believe that since we all come from the one, all of us are one, we would believe that basically life comes from that is all good, therefore life is good. So no agreement with the idea of original sin.
You find your identity as a person wrapped up in this faith expression of being a Sikh, S-I-K-H, Sikh. And that is found here also in Austin, Texas. You live here, right?
I do indeed. I work here in Austin.
And there is a Sikh community here.
Yes, there is.
Tell us about that community. How long has it been here, and what does the Sikh community, if people are interested in becoming a part of that community, how do they go about doing that?
The Western Sikhs, or I would say I'm a Sikh of American extraction or Western extraction. We've been around since 1969 when a man came here from India and began teaching a lot of classes in yoga and meditation. A lot of us, myself included, found our identities through this. He in no way tried to ever convert us. The man's name is Yogi Bhajan, Dr. Harbhajan Singh Khalsa. There are a lot of Indian Sikhs here who have moved here from other parts of the world. The Sikhs communities are spread out all over the world. Most of the Indian Sikhs tend to wear much more colorful turbans than we do. The beards are usually bound up. Those of us who practice a lot of yoga and meditation go back to the original tenets. So yes, we're here, we're in every walk of life. A lot of us primarily are in the professional trades and occupations.
You mentioned them to me before the program that that's true also in India, that many of the people who are part of the Sikh system and Sikh faith are people who are involved in the professions. Is that correct?
This is true. Sikhs are primarily known as workers. Work is part of our worship. We believe that you serve by serving others. That is how one way you serve God. So in India, although they're a very small minority, they have about, ownership of, I think, about 80% of all the bus and truck lines. They provide a very large proportion of the military and cabinet officers. They are very successful as farmers. They are one of the few religious groups in that part of the world that can laugh at themselves, and Sikh jokes are told over there very much like Aggie jokes are told here. We try not to take ourselves super seriously.
Your garb, what you're wearing, I asked you to wear that. You would not wear this when you go to work necessarily,
Right.
but this is an outfit that is worn by the Sikhs when they
True.
come together in community, or is this
True.
something unique to you?
No, this is not unique to me. All of this is designed more as a human engineering function because in my training we basically practice maximizing the energy and the manifestation of the human being, believing that that is the reality of the Creator, so that all the things you see here are very functional. The turban, the steel band, the beard, you will see when I work as an environmental scientist during the day. I may be wearing a shirt and tie instead of a formal kurta, but this is all designed for doing yogic practice, which we believe is basically a way to help find your identity within yourself.
If a person saw you walking on the street, or for instance at the community Thanksgiving service of Austin
Right.
Metropolitan Ministry, I saw you there and I had youth from our parish community with me at that service. Right away, what it captures them is your identity, your manifestation with your turban, your beard, what you wear. That sets you apart, in a sense,
True.
from the rest of the people.
True.
Do Sikhs see themselves as being set apart from the rest of the faith community?
Yes and no. The 10th teacher of the Sikhs, who told us that if you wear certain of these particular things, it will really help create your identity, your identity as a spiritual person, as a personage, said that if you do this, you have to live what's right. You can't be willing to get up in the morning and crown yourself, to crown your consciousness, as I do with 6 yards long of cotton, and then go out and try to commit a felony, go into a bar, do something that is not good for your conscience, go into the red light district. You're noticed. You're on stage everywhere you go, which is two things. You have to find out who you are, or you don't last long.
What I hear you saying, Christ Sing, then, is that what you're wearing is a reminder not only to those around you,
But to the self.
but to the self.
Yes, very much so.
Now, you're wearing, is it a pin? And I don't know if the camera can come up on that.
It's a
or not,
pin.
but there's a pin there, and it says, God is
Truth.
truth.
Sat Nam. Truth is my identity. Truth is my being, the God within.
So would it be true then to say that the Sikhs are interested in exploring what truth is for themselves,
Yes.
and in terms of the divine, the holy, that which is
True.
of God?
True. Remember that the word holy comes from whole, which means entire, and very much so. This is why we honor all other religious faiths, even when we don't agree with them. We honored the Sikh faith always. We honored the Muslim faith in ancient times, even when the Muslim Empire was trying to kill every one of us and set a price on our heads. Sikhs have been and are still persecuted in a lot of the world because we do not believe in bowing to any emperor, any king, any authority. We bow only to God. And a lot of people have given their lives for that aspect.
Starting in India and then spreading out throughout the world, you would find Sikh communities throughout the world. And
Everywhere.
then what is the difference between the Sikh community in India, for instance, and the Sikh community in Austin, Texas?
One big difference is that a lot of the Sikhs in India have made what I personally feel is a real problem by mixing religion and politics. This is the reason why you have Protestants and Catholics in Belfast who are busy trying to kill each other. You have the same problem in Lebanon. I think Mark Twain once said, when you start discussing it with most people, you start discussing religion or politics, reason flies right out the window.
And because you are seeking after truth, you would be embracing all people and all expressions of life. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
You have meditation, you mentioned. Yoga,
Yes.
meditation is a
Right.
part of your basic teaching. But it's not only that. You're also a social activist. For instance, your Sikh community here in Austin, you do a variety of things to better the community, to help people. Would you explain to our Austin Faith Dialogue about that?
Yes, we do. The idea is that you are a good neighbor by being a good neighbor. Sikhs have served in the American military since the days of President Truman with the beard and the turban. We were forced out during the days of the Reagan administration because they decided that we looked funny. We didn't look like everybody else, even though the Sikhs were the original special forces for the British Empire. Here we have a regular go-out of serving the homeless with food, with blankets. We go out and help rebuild housing. We have an active service and have had this for, for many hundreds of years.
You have given to me a prayer book, which I have in front of me, and maybe the camera can come up on that and you can have the opportunity to see. This is a Sikh prayer book.
Yes, it is.
And you mentioned that the Sikh faithful will be praying from this 5 times a day, or how often would you do that?
Right. There are five basic prayers a day, which, if you are believing in this particular faith, which you should utter. Notice that the history of Christianity says that in a lot of the seminaries and the monasteries and convents, they do 5 prayers a day. Same thing with the faithful of followers of Islam. It basically is that you're changing your consciousness in change with the electromagnetic field of the earth as it changes during the day.
By praying, then, you're coming into contact with that which is the power of life. Is that what you're saying?
Inside yourself, yes.
Your pilgrimage, we talked about identity and pilgrimage, and I'm fascinated by your life story. You were raised not in the Sikh faith, but you were raised in the Christian faith,
Yes.
and then you became a Sikh, but that wasn't done through proselyting, was it?
Not at all. I was born in Fort Worth, the same as Willie Nelson. He has a beard that looks a lot like mine, even though his head covering may not look quite the same. He sings better than I do. But I grew up as part of the Protestant faith in a small town in North Texas. I started asking a lot of questions that they found it very difficult to answer and made a lot of people very upset, so I sort of got away from it. When I was in graduate school, I started doing classes in yoga and meditation. I started finding the answers within myself, which was the last place I ever expected to look for it. I am very happy where I am now. This is the path for me. I wouldn't say it's the path for everyone. Everyone has to find their own internal path, and the whole idea is that there are 3 questions which you have to answer in life. One is, who am I?
Identity.
Where am I going? And who must I become? And this is one thing which, unfortunately, a lot of people never take time to address.
What do you see as future? Future for the Sikhs? How large is your community? Not necessarily in numbers, I'm not asking for that, but what do you see as the future of the Sikh community in Austin and in North America?
Significant, because the traditional word in India and in the East for Sikh is Sardar, which means leader. We are basically, the idea is to take leadership of a situation for the good of all, not because we're trying to push our own point of view. The fact that our society is in such a form of turmoil that I believe all major institutions are going to, within 20 years, we won't recognize the society. People had better find out who they are and where they're going, or they will be lost in the maelstrom.
Christ Singh, in that reality as you perceive it of change that is happening in our society and throughout the world, what does the Sikh faith give to you in the midst of all that turbulence and change?
A way to find out who you are, how to live and be happy, and how to live as a householder. Even though I'm a little over the age of 25, I have a 3-year-old. She's extremely active. Hi, Amritkar. Salam. We very much believe in living the idea of a householder, of manifesting your faith, and in dealing with society. We believe that you do have to deal with violence and with evil. When you find it, you have to deal with it very firmly. But at the same time, you have to be very, very fair to all the people involved.
What strikes me in listening to you, Christ Singh, and we're very pleased that you came on Austin Faith Dialogue, is that your identity is indeed wrapped up in your faith, not just your turban, not just in the garb, but in the faith you have, and also with your family, with that little sweetheart that you gave a wave to just a few minutes ago. And in all of that, you find out and experience who you are. We pray the best for the Sikh faith community here in Austin, and we thank you for being a part of us on Austin Faith Dialogue. And may God continue to bless your pilgrimage. And we invite you, our viewing audience of Austin Faith Dialogue, to stay with us, because we're going to talk to another very interesting man who will discuss with us about his identity and his faith pilgrimage. Stay with us on Austin Faith Dialogue. Thanks.
Serving Austin means serving you. That has always been the primary goal of Austin Metropolitan Ministries. We are religion in action through the work of these organizations. Each plays a key role in making the capital city a better place to live, but we can't do it alone. Do you have some spare time, talents, or any resources that you can share? If you do, please call AMM at 472-7627, because serving Austin means serving you.
Welcome back to this interesting program on Austin Faith Dialogue. Harry Hagopian comes to the Austin community as a visitor. He's a native of Jerusalem. That's interesting in and of itself. He is assistant to the executive director of the Middle East Council of Churches, and the Presbyterian tradition has invited him to tour through the United States. And Harry, we're glad to have you here, and we have discussed already the Sikh faith from India and their presence here in the Austin community, and it's part of our goal in Austin Faith Dialogue through Austin Metropolitan Ministries to share with the Austin community the richness of the religious faiths that are evidenced throughout the world and here locally. And Harry Hagopian, we're glad to have you here in Austin.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I would like you to tell us a little bit about you and about the Armenian people and about your life. You were born and raised in Jerusalem, is that correct?
Yes, I was born and raised in Jerusalem. I come from an Armenian family, and there is a fairly large Armenian community in Jerusalem, as there is everywhere else. Just like your previous guest, the Sikhs and the Jews, Armenians are dispersed all over the diaspora, primarily after the genocide of 1915, when large numbers of Armenians had to leave Turkey and flee elsewhere for their safety. Some people went to Europe, other people went to the Middle East. My family ended up in Jerusalem.
What was it like to be a boy growing up, born in Jerusalem? For people of faith like Christians here, we think of Jerusalem, the holy city. You grew up there. What was that experience like? Did you grow up in a congregation there? Did you attend worship, Sunday church school? What was it like for Harry the child?
Well, for Harry the child, it was not that different as for somebody who's coming from the outside. People who come from the outside are always more impressed by the aura and the magic that Jerusalem and the Holy Land in general imparts. But for somebody who's growing there, it becomes very much part and parcel of your daily life, of your daily witness into your faith and into your community. And I just grew up, I guess, as any other person would grow, whether they are Christian, Muslim, or Jew. And it is the uniqueness of the Armenian tradition as an identity, and that identity is its ethnicity as much as it is its faith, that sustains you through the times.
In your spiritual pilgrimage, we talked with our previous guest about identity and pilgrimage. Then in your pilgrimage, spiritually, as a person of faith, your identity was wrapped up in being an Armenian and being a Christian. And you mentioned to me before the program started that there are the faithful forgotten in the Middle East among the Christian community. Would you talk to our Austin Faith Dialogue viewing audience about that?
Well, yes, you mentioned that I'm here on a speaking tour for 3 months in the United States, and one of the two objectives I bring with me, or one of the two messages I try to convey, is that there are 14 million Christians all over the Middle East, and I refer to them as the forgotten faithful, because when you think of the Middle East, or people think of the Middle East in terms of only Muslims and Jews, and forget that there are many, many local indigenous Christians who have been there. After all, don't forget the first church of the Pentecost started from the Middle East, and we tend sometimes to overlook those facts and think that Christianity is something which comes from the West into the East rather than from the Orient outward. And this is why I call them the forgotten faithful. They are people who are struggling through their daily lives, who are witnessing to their faith, and of those 12 to 14 million in the Middle East, there are quite a few of them. Unfortunately, the numbers are dwindling, but there are quite a few of them in the Holy Land as well, historically Palestine, politically Israel.
Tell us about the Middle East Council of Churches located in Cyprus.
We are an ecumenical organization which its distinctiveness or uniqueness, I suppose, from other ecumenical organizations, even the World Council of Churches in Geneva, is that all churches of the Protestant, Orthodox, and Catholic traditions are represented as full members. In other words, we basically represent the whole Christian community in the Middle East. And our work and activity and ministry is not only or is solely centered around issues or matters of faith, but it also goes into social activism, it goes into the outreach, which should be an integral part of our faith, and it also has a large program for humanitarian relief and development, especially with the refugees all over the Middle East and in the wake of the Gulf conflict as well.
What is the peace process for people in the West? We hear about the argument, the fighting, the violence that goes on in the Middle East. What is the peace process that you and the Middle East Council of Churches would be involved in between Jews and Muslims, Christians? What is happening in that peace process?
Well, there are two dimensions. If you're talking about interfaith dialogue, there is constant interfaith dialogue between Christians, Muslims, and Jews in order to reach in some sort of understanding of our different traditions and our different viewpoints. Insofar as Christians in themselves are concerned, you're as much aware as I am that there are differences within the Christian communities in the Middle East as well. And there also we strive to find unity, but unity in diversity. We are not trying to form one mold, and that is it. We are just trying to reassemble the body of Christ, while at the same time retaining the diverse traditions which actually give the distinctiveness of those particular communities. Now, on a different level, if you talk politically, we support the peace process that is taking place at the moment, and that is a peace process that should continue so long as it leads to a just settlement, and that it is not just a piecemeal, one step at a time process, but one that will ultimately result in peace in the whole region.
Why do you think it is? This is your first trip to the United States.
This is my first trip to the United States.
And also you're an attorney, right?
I'm an attorney.
You're a doctor of jurisprudence.
I am.
And you were raised in a Christian home. Why is it now, having had the opportunity to visit the United States, your wife is in England, is that correct, in London? So you have a sense of the Western world, so to speak, that we think of, as you pointed out, of Christianity being more of a Western religion rather than recognizing the origins of Christianity from the Middle East. And what is our struggle in getting that sense of unity with the people in the Middle East, from your observation, Harry?
Well, from my observations, I think that it has to do a lot with history and with politics, in the sense that I cannot but admit that there is some sort of a colonial attitude, which also includes a certain element of arrogance of certain Christian communities in the West, who themselves believe that they are the ones who are Bible-centered and Christ-centered enough to be able to lead other Christian communities. And we disagree with that. Our aim is that we recognize that we are a minority in the Middle East, a very small minority and an ever-diminishing minority. And therefore, what we need is the partnership between our communities in the Middle East and the Christians in the West together, not from a position of power or force, but from a position of partnership, the two together helping each other in solidarity.
What would that, from your point of view again, Harry, what would that partnership, that solidarity, that sense of unity between people of faith of the Christian expression and those in the Middle East and in the West and in the Middle East, what would be the benefit? What would come of that, do you think?
Well, if you take it primarily initially that we're all brothers and sisters in Christ, and that you have those communities in the Middle East which are struggling because of the political, because of the economic situation, then inevitably you would get you would come to a time when you would need the sustenance, the help, and the support of the people from the West who have the wherewithal and who have the influence and the capacity to help. Politically, there is also a lot that the West could do to help the Christian communities in the Middle East. But I also feel that it is unjust to think of this as a one-way traffic only, because there is a lot that Western Christians are suffering themselves, and their own sense of identity is at times very elusive and very uncertain. So it is very difficult for somebody whose own sense of identity is not very clear to try and impose an identity on another fellow Christian community.
You mentioned that for people who come and visit the Holy Land, Jerusalem, there's an aura to all of that. They sense, when I was a boy, my mother would play and I'd sing, "I walk today where Jesus walked," type of thing, all right? You mentioned before the program that you played on the banks of the River Jordan, that type of thing. How can we get in touch with one another then so that there can be that mutuality between Christians in the United States or North America or the Western world and Christians there in the Middle East? Does it start with a sense of respect for history?
It starts with a sense of respect for history, and I must say that the Middle East Council of Churches, my organization, at the moment is very actively involved in engaging dialogue between Western Christians and Western evangelical Christian communities and Christians in the Middle East in order to try to overcome this, I suppose you could call it a historical, political, or even psychological barrier, in order that we come to a stage where we respect each other's identities, each other's traditions. We do not forget history, we do not forget where Christianity originated from, but at the same time we support each other, because in the end we are not talking about an undivided body of Christ, which is partly in the East and partly in the West. The whole ethos of Christianity is that one unity, and if that unity in diversity could be maintained wherever Christians are, then that is the ultimate goal that we seek.
Would that then be your agenda or the agenda of the Middle East Council of Churches, that by coming here to the United States, spending these 3 months traveling, going different places, speaking and preaching, I understand?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure about preaching. I'm not.
But I would imagine you do a fine job in the pulpit, that you might be able to embody that kind of unity that we want to have.
Well, I'm trying to embody and also to reflect and translate that sense of unity that we are seeking. That is the one message, constantly reminding people that there are what I called and you refer to as the forgotten faithful, and they are an integral part of the life of the Christian tradition and witness along the ages. And also the other message that goes hand in hand with that is also to inject a spark of hope in the peace process that sometimes in the West is sensationalized as being, as unraveling, as being derailed. That in itself is also a message I carry with me.
Are you a person of hope?
I'm very much a person of hope. That is one of the, that's a core of the Christian faith.
Do you think that the people of faith in the Middle East are people of hope?
People of faith in the Middle East are people of hope despite the pessimism and the difficult times that they are living through. Were they not people of hope, I don't think they would have survived so long.
And we are grateful that God, in the wisdom and goodness of God, brought you to us so that we can hear your message. And we hope that you'll bring back to the people in Jerusalem and Cyprus and Middle East our greetings from the people of faith in Austin, Texas. Harry Agopian, thank you for being with us. And thanks to all of you for being with us as we met two very interesting people talk about their identity and their faith pilgrimage. May God bless you in both of those realities for you. Thanks for watching Austin Faith Dialogue.
For more information, call Austin Metropolitan Ministries at 472-7627.